in the schools, that my pastor's not opening the Bible anymore or whatever it might be. And so people were awakened over the last 10, 15 years by different events that made them realize, wait a minute, something's going on here. This thing is sinking, and everyone's playing golf or pretending that it'll be fine, because it's always been fine. But I know you're here because you know that is not true, and it is not true. If you don't know that, I'll just tell you it's not going to be okay. Okay, if we continue on the course and on the road we're walking, we're going to arrive at the final destination. We don't have to go, well, what's that? All we have to do is look at the 20th century, and we see the ideology of communism. What is communism? It is simply what you get when you reject God. That's all it is. People try to complicate it into Marxist theory and all that. No, it's when you say, God, you're out of here, you get communism, and you will get it every time. And it will be just like it was in the 20th century, where it's slaughter, torture, abuse, because that's who Satan is. That's who their commander-in-chief is. Many of you, hopefully all of you, are born-again Christians, where you know Jesus Christ and he's forgiven you. And so you're one of his disciples on this earth. That's what we're here for, to make him look good, to glorify him in what we do. And so most Christians, oh yeah, that's right. But they don't realize, well, Satan has his disciples too. And I've been studying those disciples for decades because I wanted to understand what they're doing to deceive, to manipulate, to control, to take our children. And I realized, boy, from reading their books and articles, they're far more committed than we are. I'm just telling you. Their commitment to a lie is so far beyond our commitment to the truth. It's really it makes you kind of ashamed when I read through some of their diaries and things where, it's the cause. It's the only point in life, nothing else. It's everything. I'm not going to get married. I'm just so I can work toward creating the struggle for world communism. And because they believe it's supposed to be some paradise on earth. But of course it's hell on earth, because in Psalms it tells us the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. It's so powerful. That's what you get. You turned into hell, and hell on this earth is a communist state, as we don't need to look very far to see that. Pastor mentioned at the beginning, it's a spiritual battle, and it is. And if you don't get that, you're dealing with weapons and things that aren't going to be effective in this battle. Tonight, I'm going to just talk about 5th generation warfare, which is the battle for your heart and mind, especially the heart and mind of your children and your grandchildren. That's all. That's the whole thing, is that. They know, oh, we're old, we're going to die off soon. We want your children, and we want your grandchildren, because they know that is the future. And so, but in Ephesians 6, there it talks real briefly here. It says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, the tricks of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's what this is. It's Satan and his disciples doing everything they can to flip how God intended everything to be on its head. That's why it's not missing anything. God created marriage. Okay, we're going to redefine marriage. We're going to redefine. He created male and female. We're going to destroy that. It's not stopping with anything. It has to destroy everything, because Satan knows this book better than we do. And so he sees what God intended to be, and he goes, I'm not stopping till nothing is the way he intended it to be. And so that's the battle that we were in. And of course, John 8:44, it talks about Satan, who is the father of lies. And it says there is no truth in him. I think that's so interesting. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, That's why you wonder why is the narrative always a lie? That's why. There is no truth in him. He is the prince of this world. He is the one that has had his disciples take over all the institutions of influence to use those as weapons against Christ and the church and his people. And that's what we're in the middle of. But I do think many are starting to wake up, which is wonderful. Because when you have the truth and you have God and you're on his side, there's only one reason he allows the other side to win. It's because he does that sometimes to punish and to judge his children for being disobedient, for not doing what he's asked us to do. When you give your kids over to a system that hates him and you expect everything's going to be okay, and then they turn their back on God and everything good, he's like, what did you expect? Do you think my disciples are going to be trained in the system with everybody else? Of course they're not. They need special training. Deuteronomy 6 talks about that. When you get up in the morning, when you walk along the way, when you sit in your house, when you go to bed at night, that's 4 times a day. We're supposed to be talking to our children, discipling them, talking about the things of God and the lies in the world. Hey, son, did you see that billboard? That's a lie. It made it look like whatever it is fun and games. It's not. The Bible says this about that. And so often, I think a great way to do it is when you take young people where they can see the consequences. The advertisements don't show you the consequences. But you go down to a prison on a Saturday night at the local jail and have the police let your kids in there, look at the people in there that are sick and been arrested for drunkenness. That's where the commercial doesn't tell you the end of the story. Here's where it ends. Or go to the crisis pregnancy center. This is where that ends, sweetie. and diseases. And so, but that's what our job is. This battle that's raging with this 5th generation warfare, it's totally different, but it makes sense. Satan would do things this way. Warfare has gone through a lot of stages over time. 1st generation warfare is more the line and column tactics. The Civil War pictures where they just line up in 2 rows and then shoot each other, which doesn't seem like a great strategy to me. But at some point, maybe it was honorable just to stand up and die like a man, but it's not very strategic. But a lot of different changes have happened. And as you've seen different weapons and then speed and stealth, and guerrilla warfare and planes and different types of guns and things with the rifling to where you can also hit someone at a greater distance. So war started spreading out. But 5th generation warfare is something they have been working on for about 100 years, but they've really gotten it down. Now it's the war we're in, it's ads on the TV. It's social media posts. It's textbooks full of propaganda. It's them brainwashing the children to make them believe you can't tell if someone's a male or female. It's like, oh, you can't? All that is strategic attacks. When you're not sure about something so concrete as that's a boy and that's a girl, you find the confusion and the silencing of you is what it does. Because you're afraid to even talk to anybody. Well, what if I misgender them or something to offend them? I'm not trying to do that, but it sure looked like a lady, but she says she's a man. But it's all that. It's divide and conquer. It's to isolate you, where you're all by yourself with your phone. And so the only information you're receiving is from them. The text, you post something that's not part of the narrative, the bots, if nobody else does it, the bots will attack you. How hateful you are to talk like that, how mean, and you're like, oh, sorry, I was just speaking the truth. But that's, we know when Elon Musk bought Twitter, there are millions of those bots. We never even found out the total number. But think about that. They had programmed millions of bots, computer programs, to simply go in from a leftist point of view and post things. They're not even real people, but they're millions that look like they're real people, and attack anyone that's not speaking the party line. That's how serious they are about this. And then deleting you if you won't take your whipping and sit down, then we'll censor you. You're done. You're out of here. They turned off my YouTube account about 2 years ago. Just pulled the plug on it. No warnings. No, you're done. Which was a great compliment. It goes, oh, so I am dangerous speaking the truth. But that's amazing. That's where we are. There's so many parts of this that are so interesting to understand. But if you go back, I like kind of researching and studying the history. Okay, where did some of these things start? And of course, all of this is in the Bible. It's good versus evil. It's God versus Satan. So but in modern times, I thought, where did this whole current march toward world government and totalitarian control start? And it's very clear if you march back into the late 1800s, it starts with a man named Cecil Rhodes. Any of you ever heard of him? You ever heard of Rhodes Scholarships? Same guy. Very clever scheme he came up with to get the best and the brightest of the world on their side. But he graduated from college in the mid to late 1800s. He was a young man in his 20s. He heard that they were discovering diamonds down in Africa, and he just had a lust for power and control. He went down there, and through an amazing turn of events, he got to know the Rothschilds family, who was the ones that were doing the mining and everything, kind of partnered up with them. And by the time he was about 30 or so, he was one of the richest people in the world. He was part owner of all the diamond mines in Africa. And he had so much influence back then. Have you ever heard of the country Rhodesia? It was named after Cecil Rhodes, Rhodesia. I mean, that's how influential this guy was. And he died like at 48, 49 years old, a drunkard and a pedophile openly. His own book he wrote talks about that. But he had so much influence on this world. But he said in his own writing, in 1877, he joined the Masonic order, and he said he came home from the ceremony, and all of a sudden a vision came before his eyes. And he wrote it down in a book called Confession of Faith. But he said it just all of a sudden danced before his eyes, and this was what it was. We need to start a secret society with but one goal, and he outlines it in there. It's to work toward the economic, political, and religious unification of the world. A one world religion, one world economic system, and a one world political system. Well, he talked to the Rothschilds family about that, and they were on board. So what they would do is, the Rothschilds were the richest family in the world. They still are today. They're quiet now. You never hear from them again, and their money's hidden in things. But they knew all the wealthy families of the world. So back then in the late 1800s, they would have luncheons where Cecil Rhodes would present his vision of the secret society opening up into the one world government, religion, and everything. And they said he was such a gifted communicator. When he was done talking at the end of those luncheons, most of the time, every family in the room there said, our entire family fortune's in. We want to be part of this. So they, in a short order, gathered all the super rich of the world. Were like, we're in. And then he talks about it here. But it's, and so that's how they gathered this. In the first group he started was called the Society of the Elect. Very humble man. And from that, you probably haven't heard of that group, but I studied that group, and from that group came every group you ever have heard of. The Council on Foreign Relations. That was the branch of it that started in America. The Rothschilds went over and sat in on one of his meetings and said, we're going to start this in America. And in 1921, they started the Council on Foreign Relations, who in their original charter, if you look at it, says their goal is world government. And yet every president since 1921 has had most of his advisors be members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And you say, well, even Reagan, almost his entire cabinet was Council on Foreign Relations. And you go, why? Because they have sold themselves to Washington, D.C. as we're the brains of D.C. Who doesn't want the brains of D.C. on your side? When all of a sudden you're president, you get put up here and like, well, what do you want us to do about Uganda? I don't know, you want advice. So they cleverly put themselves right there in Washington, D.C. and they have 250 PhDs on staff and everything to write up the papers, to give to Congress, say, this is what we recommend. You can do whatever you want, but 99% of the time, they just do exactly what they tell them to do. That's why when you study the 20th century, almost everything our State Department was always doing was so anti-American, so pro-communist and stuff. As I've studied this, they would be given the anti-communist speeches, the presidents and things, but if you look behind the scenes, they're funding the communists, they're propping them up, their systems are collapsing, so we're sending them food. You're like, what's going on? Well, they needed an enemy like communism to create the fear so they could build up the military-industrial complex and everything else to keep us worrying about the Soviets instead of them, worrying about the Democrats instead of, they want everyone divided, fighting each other, so they never turn on them and go, no, we're tired of the lies, we're done with this. But that's what they did. But the Trilateral Commission came from that, the Bilderberger groups, the World Economic Forum, all those groups, everyone you've ever heard of, that's where they all came from. And you see it and you're like, oh my goodness. And the Rhodes Scholarship thing, I just want to finish on that. What that is, you probably heard of that. So before he died, he left his fortune in the Rhodes Scholarship Fund. And what they do with this is so strategic. It makes sense. Why are all the people that are higher up in things always wicked people and against, freedom and free enterprise and stuff? Well, so every year they give full scholarships to the best and the brightest of the world, whoever has the best test scores, the best everything. And they come to them and say, we'll pay for you to go to college wherever you want. And you're like, thank you. You don't want anything in return? No? Okay. So they go get their scholarship to Harvard or wherever they want to go. And then as soon as they graduate, all the other Rhodes Scholars over the last 100 years help them be successful in whatever they are doing. So you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then if you're fortunate enough to become a governor, a senator, head of a Fortune 500 company, some big position, that's when they come to you and say, we want to let you in on the inner circle of the inner circle. We're working toward the economic, political, and religious unification of the world, and we need your help. And these people have made your whole life. So of course you're like, you're flattered. Oh, I'm on the inner circle. Yeah, we tell presidents what to do. We tell prime ministers what to do. Oh, okay. And so that's how they've done this, where you go, how did this work? But that was a genius idea, because even though Cecil Rhodes was an evil man, he knew you get the children, you have everything. And our side has been so negligent in that area, not taking it seriously. When God gives you, if he gives you one child, or I have 9 children, okay? And I'm thankful for that, yes. But if he gives you 1 or 10 or 20, that doesn't matter. What matters is, did you realize the gift he has given you in a child? It gives you a hand in the future. When you're long gone, you still have influence. You still have an effect on this world if you've done your best and then prayed for God's mercy and help in raising them to love and fear him and to go stand for the truth and make a difference. I love it because in God's genius, it makes every man's life so valuable. Well, I never did much, but that's okay. Did you raise your kids? That you've had a more meaningful life than a president. A president has tremendous influence for 4 years as he's president. But as we just saw after Trump, when Biden came in, the day he came in, he erased every single thing Trump did. So then 0 influence. The father, he's teaching those children, and then the grandchildren, and then the great-grandchildren, as long as he's breathing. His influence is growing over time. It's not lessening. And God knew, I want every man to have a meaningful life. But these people knew, we want the kids. We want to convince the women, go out into the world and go work for somebody else and have a meaningful life. We'll raise those kids, because we know that's the most powerful position in the world. Well, so Cecil Rhodes, with this vision, was able to get all the super elites and the wealthy and the bankers of the world on board. Then in the 1920s, there was a man named Antonio Gramsci. If you see my movie, I talk about him a little bit. But he was a communist. And he had studied things enough. And he went over to the Soviet Union back in the teens. And he went to talk to Vladimir Lenin. who had started the Soviet Union. He said, listen, I'm a communist. I'm working toward world communism like you are. But I want you to know, if you're going to try to take over a country that believes in God, you have to have a different strategy. And Lenin's like, oh, no, we don't. We're going to have world communism through world revolution. And he kicked him out of the Soviet Union, back to Italy, and where Mussolini threw him in prison, and he spent the rest of his life. Never left prison. But he wrote a book from prison called Notes from Prison. I'm going to read you one sentence out of that book, because it outlines the entire strategy then of how, all the super wealthy are already on board with this vision of world government. Now this is what gave all the foot soldiers of communism a vision. Okay, here's what we're going to do with our life. Yeah, we might not have money, we might not have much influence, but we're going to work toward this. This is really powerful. This is 1932, he wrote this. This is what's been going on in America for 92 years. Listen, quote, any country grounded in Judeo-Christian values can't be overthrown until those roots are cut. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of the schools, universities, churches, and the media. That's it. So, and isn't it interesting, Pastor? What's going to overwhelm Christianity? The religion of socialism. It's a religion, and they know it. Even our Supreme Court identified secular humanism, which is taught in all of our schools in this country, as a religion. They have tax-exempt status if you are a secular humanist society. That's years ago. Our Supreme Court said, yes, that is a religion. And yet it's taught in all of our schools. Like, wait a minute, I thought you're supposed to have a separation. No, just a separation of Christianity, because it's the only thing that frees men from the fear of government and from tyranny, and they can't have that. They can't have people going, kill me if you want, I don't care. I'm doing what is right regardless. They don't want that kind of opposition. Some of the areas that and then I'll go through a little bit more of how they grew this. But yeah, I'll just keep doing that right now, and then I'm going to give a few modern day examples here. But so way too many notes. So anyway, it's interesting to me. So after Cecil Rhodes in the late 1800s, there was a man who wrote a book in 1895, which became a key field manual for these people. It was called The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. And he had studied crowds, and he studied, wow, people will do things in a crowd that they would never do by themselves. So he studied, how can we force people into a crowd so we can get them to do things they won't do? And then how do we, if we get people gathered into a crowd, how can we make it be, well, we're the ones that rise up as the leader of a crowd? He goes, because there's one thing I've observed in a crowd, it demands a leader. Someone will rise up as the leader. If you get a group of people all stirred up over something, one person, he goes, so he studied that and wrote a book on it. Well, all the people, we're not ever really trying to control other people, so we don't even think like that. But all the people that want to control people read that book and said, oh man, this is incredible. This is how you can get people, get do anything, stuff they would never on their own go, that's ridiculous, I would never do that. In a crowd, they'll do it. Well, one of the men that read that book was a man named Edward Bernays, and he was a marketing guy in Madison Avenue. And he started to realize, wow, that is powerful, how you can get people to do things. And he started working on learning how to manipulate people. He was in an advertising firm there. And before World War I, Americans didn't want to go to war, obviously. Why do you want to go send all your boys to die when it wasn't clear what was going on? And you look at today, nothing was going on. It's just the elites wanting to shuffle things around, do this. I mean, there was nothing, no outcome, no point to the war, but they wanted America to be in the war because you can make a tremendous amount of money in war. So they came to him and they said, what do you think? He was a famous marketing person. How can we manipulate the American people into wanting to go to World War I? And he looked and took surveys and studies, and he said, all you have to do, he goes, I can tell the average American loves their country. So if you can cloak it in enough patriotism, they will want to go to war. And you cloak whoever is against this war as a traitor to America, and you will silence everyone in opposition. And they say, okay. And they realize it's true. That's when Uncle Sam came out and all this stuff. He went, all of a sudden they realized, okay, that was all marketing from Madison Avenue to get us to go, okay, we're going to go, we're willing to send our sons to die. We're not sure what it's for, but we've heard it's patriotic to do that, so we'll do it. I mean, that's how evil this is. And that happened, a useless war. Millions of young men worldwide died. And in fact, any of you ever heard of a man named Smedley Butler? He wrote a book. He was one of the most decorated heroes ever in American history. And he fought in World War I and many wars before that. And then in 1934, I believe it was, he wrote a book called War is a Racket. And in that book, it's humbling, it's sobering. He said, I realize now, I thought I was fighting for my country and freedom and patriotism. All I was fighting for is big corporations and banks so they could pillage the resources of the world. And then in the book there, and you can still get it on Amazon, in the book, he has all the top companies that made war products and stuff. It shows their profits go up 10 times when America's at war. DuPont and all these different companies. He has them all, the actual numbers in there from before World War I and during World War I and after. And for him to acknowledge it, that's tough. That was his whole life. But he was man enough to go, no, I have to speak the truth. I'm not going to just hide behind all. He had 2 Congressional Medals of Honor. I mean, he was unheard of. He's just an incredible guy. But he said, no, I have to now admit I was deceived. I was lied to. This was about making money for a very small group of people. It was not about what I thought it was about. That's a powerful book. Well, then in 1928, Edward Bernays wrote the book Propaganda, which you've probably heard of. It's a famous book. But that's where he really laid out for the advertisers of the world. At first, realized, man, if you want people to buy your product, you can manipulate them into buying it. One of the first things he was asked to do by the pork industry is they said, we're having trouble selling bacon to people for breakfast. They don't think it's healthy for them. So he said, okay, let me see. And he took a survey across America back then. Who was the most respected person? And he found out back then it was doctors. So he said, okay. So he, in all his advertisements and commercials, had doctors saying, we recommend, in their white coats and everything with their thing, we recommend having bacon for breakfast every morning. It's so good for you. And the sales took off, even though they're lying to them. But he realized you get the right person to lie to people. What have we just lived through with COVID? You get the people, well, they respect it. You get them to lie, people, oh, okay, I'll give you a shot, or whatever it is. But they realized it, but our government saw that, and they hired him, and they started to use him. And the OSS was going back then during World War II, which turned into the CIA, and they said that is our path forward. That's what we're going to do. A lot of people, if you dig in, I don't have time to get into all the details, but most everything going on information-wise in America since World War I and World War II has been total propaganda. 3 of the 3-letter agencies you didn't know were 3-letter agencies of the government, but we now know the funding came to them from the CIA, ABC, NBC, and CBS. All 3 of those were started by the CIA. So they knew if that's the news you're getting, that's all you have. And so you're going to, oh, okay. Not realizing they're carefully crafting this stuff for you. And we've seen that now just in the last several years, since the Twitter stuff and President Trump, you realize that, we found out, no, the government is telling Facebook, which I think, and I don't have proof of all this, I have proof that the CIA funded Google to get it started, which makes sense. We know this, the month that our government said it's okay now for our country to surveil American citizens and propagandize them. It was after September 11th. It was 2007. They finally passed this additional bill that had been off limits before. Supposedly they've been doing it, but it was supposed to be off limits. That very month that now it's okay to surveil and it's okay to propagandize the American people, the first iPhone came out. I don't think that's an accident. Again, I don't have proof of all those details, but our military has always had advanced technologies. We know they started the World Wide Web. That was our military started that for communicating and stuff, and then they realized, okay, this can be used for a lot of other things, but I wouldn't be surprised if that iPhone wasn't a gift to Apple and they could perfect the details because they wanted everyone. Now that we can surveil them, if they have a camera and a microphone on them everywhere they go, it's going to make our job really easy, really easy. And so much of this is as you dig in, you're just like, oh my goodness. But I think YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and all the other ones, we know the government has their hands in them because it's come out many stories where they were told, Mark Zuckerberg said, yeah, they told, no, you have to take down these stories, you have to put these ones on, you have to. So, but I think it's more detailed than they say. These people are happy to be billionaires and the elite class, but they know this stuff was given to us by the military, and so we have to go along to get along, or we will lose our money real quickly and not be the elites anymore. So, but these different things happen. But so the reason I tell you all of that is, to not be deceived so easily. The narrative is always going to be a lie in a country that has rejected God. It's always going to be a lie. So, but our children, we need to protect. We need to understand. That's why I do what I do every week, trying to help educate people, because I know pastors and stuff, they don't have time to be doing this all the time, but they need to know what's going on. Just like every father has to know what's going on. Being a father or a pastor is the toughest job in the world because you have to know everything. You go, how do you? I don't know. You do it by prayer and by doing the best you can to find sources to help you understand the times. Because if you're leading anybody and you're naive or ignorant in a certain area, you're going to lead them astray, and you can't do that. And a pastor can't do that. That's why I so appreciate you that you would even allow this kind of talk. This is important for the church to say, wake up. You think it's not a playground. It's a battleground, and we're losing. And we're losing 92% of our children after 1 year of college. 92% of those raised in the church. So that's why, and I love families and I love young people. And so that's my heart in this, but we have to awaken, we have to repent in areas we maybe didn't protect like we should have. God, forgive me. He's wonderful in that he forgives whatever like that, no matter how atrocious or whatever, when it's a repentant heart. But then you need to go and do the opposite. You realize, okay, I didn't protect my children like I should have. I was ignorant. I'm sorry. But now would you help me have influence over my children or grandchildren or other children in the church or whatever? I want to influence young people now for good because I understand I blew that. And he loves that kind of prayer. And he will answer that prayer, and he will give you opportunities to impart wisdom to the next generation to make a difference because he loves that. So a few of the things here that we've lived through, as you know, is fifth generation warfare. Of course, COVID was a fifth generation war, the whole thing. When you're getting half-truths and lies and by the people that you were supposed to respect, a mask will protect you. A mask does not protect you. How do you know that? You study all the medical journals ever done on that. Right? When COVID started, I did that because I have a lung issue. So I thought, ooh, and it was like February, and it was just something spreading. So I started researching, would a mask help me? No, went through 17 different studies. No, there's 0% influence on a virus, spread of a virus. A mask doesn't do anything, especially the Walmart mask. They say right on the box, our holes are bigger than a basketball net for viruses. It says not for medical use right on the mask. And they're actually toxic to have on because the little particles you breathe into your lungs. So it's actually dangerous. But those liars would tell people that are vulnerable to something, yeah, put on the mask, you'll be okay. That's when I realized, okay, this is just satanic. Because you're giving them false hope. First of all, you're making them so fearful of something that, hey, this is not that bad if we get the right pre-treatments, if we take care of ourselves, we get out in the sunshine instead of having lockdowns. No, it's beach day. Everyone has to go outside and take your shirt off and get some sun or whatever, so your immune system is ready to battle whatever might come along. But we were lied to, so that we just lived through that. The 6-foot distancing and stuff. They've even said now, I've made that up. I knew at the time you made that up. Someone sneezes in this room, we're all going to get it. I mean, it's just so silly. It's like a 6-foot leash on the virus. Whoa, we can't, But they were doing that to separate us and divide us from each other, where we stand back. We don't talk to each other. That's all accomplishing multiple things. One other fifth generation thing I want to talk about before I just wrap up here, because I know we want to have some questions and answers. This one's an important one, because this is not going away ever, no matter how much facts we have, proof, whatever, and that's the climate nonsense. Okay, it's never going away, because you can't step down from a cause that sounds so noble. Oh, what are you doing? I'm just saving the planet. That's pretty noble sounding. So you can't step down from that to something, or you'll lose the troops. So that's why I know it's not going away. And they've picked something, it's very strategic. They've picked something that is something we all care about. Every single one of us care about the environment. So they knew we're going to pick something everyone cares about. So then if we can be the ones to determine what it means to be green, but those are going to be things that help us accomplish our goals, we got it made. Because everyone almost is going to be on board, because they're like, well, yeah, I want clean air and clean water, and I want us to steward our resources. Yeah, it sounds great. But we're going to package it here where it has nothing to do with that. And it doesn't, of course. I even went up to Vancouver, British Columbia a few years ago to meet with Dr. Patrick Moore. If you don't know who that is, he's the co-founder of Greenpeace. So he cares about the environment. And I went to visit him in his home, and I said, Dr. Moore, and he has an environmental group up there, but doing real things. So he still totally cares about the environment, but productive things like managing forests, because it's the greatest resource we have. We need to manage them. You don't just leave them to themselves. The disease goes through, the dead wood falls, and the fires just burn the whole thing down. You want to manage those things because they are precious and they're wonderful. But I said, why did you leave Greenpeace in the 1980s? The group you had started to try to make a difference. And he said this exact word for word: I left them because the communists took it over. He said when the Berlin Wall came down, they all came into the environmental movement, and just all of a sudden they were doing things, and this is his own words, someone that cares, that were hurting the environment and human beings. He actually is a classic liberal that actually cares about the people. He's like, what the suffering in Africa and third world countries because of their policies is unbelievable. They estimate every year between 5 and 10 million young minority children die worldwide because of environmental policies that are already on the books. Not one's coming. All over Africa, they're not allowed to do so many different things. They're not allowed to have electricity. No, you can't industrialize. It'll kill the planet. Well, when you don't have electricity, what happens? You don't have refrigeration. So that means every day of your life is spent looking for something to eat because you can't preserve it. So you're just in this survival mode. You're never going to be able to build a business or what am I going to eat today? I got to go walk 2 miles for water because I don't have electricity, and then I got to kill something or eat something, and then I got to go to bed and start it all over again. So there's no progress without electricity, and they know that. They want to keep them down like that. But anyway, when he said that, I knew that was the case, and I loved hearing it right from his mouth because he was deep in this from the early 70s on. But here's the facts that you need to know when people are talking about the environmental movement. Number one, the foundational premise is CO2 is a pollutant. I didn't go to government school, so it's laughable. If you went to government schools, you're brainwashed into that. CO2 is plant food, and we do not have near enough of it in the atmosphere right now. We have 400 parts per million right now of CO2 in the atmosphere. That doesn't mean anything unless you go, well, what's the optimum level? And you talk to greenhouse growers who have carbon dioxide machines pumping into their greenhouse, and they said 1,600 parts per million is the ideal level of CO2 for everything that is green. And when you can quadruple the level of CO2 in the atmosphere, everything green explodes. And the growth efficiency is 100% increase. So if you have a tomato plant inside a greenhouse and the same size one outside the greenhouse, the one inside will produce twice the amount of tomatoes on the same size plant if you can quadruple the CO2. It's a great blessing. But unfortunately, we have hardly any control of the CO2, but we're toward the bottom. If it ever gets below 150 parts per million, everything green dies. And the people that have called themselves the green movement are working to stop the production of CO2 worldwide. They're even creating these machines that suck it out of the atmosphere, which could be devastating to mankind if they're successful in implementing those things. That's how low we are. And so, but it's a total lie. But it's, you know, when it's always the opposite of the truth, that's brainwashing. Okay? If someone's off a little bit, it might be naive or ignorant or whatever, and you can come back from a little lie. But they know it's really tough when you've been taught CO2 is a pollutant to ever accept. No, CO2 is fertilizer for everything that is green. It's a bridge too far. That's why you know it's always, the Marxists always use the opposite. The next opposite they have is warming is bad. Well, on the hottest day here in Kansas in the middle of the summer, you probably go, yeah, I wish it wouldn't go up a degree or two. But the reality is this. If you go down to the equator and stand right on the equator, I've been down there on a mission trip. It's the hottest place on the planet. And you notice something instantly when you're there. Life loves warmth. The biodiversity of plants and animals is unbelievable. They have thousands of species of plants and insects and animals we don't even have here. It's too cold here for them to exist. And you go up to northern Alaska or Canada and you notice something. Life hates the cold. Only a few species of trees, only a few animals can even survive. It's a total lie. If we could warm the planet at a degree or two, it would be the most wonderful blessing ever. We don't have control of it. It's the big fireball in the sky. But if we could, it'd be wonderful. You would have hundreds of millions of more acres in Canada and in Russia you could farm if it'd go up just a couple degrees. They'd have a long enough season where they could grow. We'd have more food than you would know what to do with. It's all a total lie for power and control. So you go, why are they against CO2? Because everything you do that is productive produces CO2. It's to control, it's to create poverty and then dependence. Because, oh, you can't, energy is so expensive, I can't even, drive the truck to go do my job to make some money. It just impoverishes everyone. They love poverty because poor people are very easy to control. We saw that in the Soviet Union, and we see it in China and everything else. So that's why they do that. And then the last one is clearly from Satan. There's too many people on the planet. Well, that might be believable if you don't ever travel in your life. But I travel a lot. I've been in all 50 states, most of them 20 or 30 times each. And America is completely empty. I mean, it's shocking. It's really like one of my sons is now a pilot and has a little private plane, and we've flown all over the South and stuff, even where you think Florida's popular. Florida's empty. It's completely empty. When you fly, you go, oh my goodness, it's a little town here, and then 100 miles of nothing, a little town, or then a big city, and then all of a sudden open. There's nobody here. But demographers tell us, and they study the science of populations, we're getting ready to enter a crisis. Because we have rejected the blessings of children now for 50, 60, 70 years worldwide, especially all the European countries and America, we're way below replacement, we're dying off. They say in just a few years, when this generation of elderly die off, there's no one to replace them. And the world population is going to go from about 9, it'll get to about 9 because of modern medicine and indoor plumbing and things that have helped us live longer. And then it's going to start dropping. They say as far as they can see. And they know with exact certainty. Why? Because you can't have more adults in the future than you have children today. So they know exactly. It's not like we think, if you're not having children today, that means you will not have adults 20 years from now. I mean, it's just, you're going to have fewer and fewer and fewer. And that's what's happening. So that's a lie. But it wouldn't surprise because of Satan hates us because we're made in the image of God. So that makes sense. But that's the whole environmental movement. So every part of it is a complete and total lie. But they're accomplishing it. These windmills and the solar panels. Do you know they're like, it's laughable, but the electric vehicles, the solar panels, and the wind turbines, those are three, if you're really looking at environmental issues, those are the three most damaging things to the real environment of anything that there is. But that makes sense. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. The amount of mining that needs to be done for every car battery causes real pollution as they dig up toxins down in the environment and they come out into the water, the streams and stuff. And most of it's being done by slave labor of little children in most of the countries that are doing that mining too. So it's evil from that point of view. But isn't that, it just, you see that and you're like, man, we should have known. So I'm going to wrap up here with a few things, and then we're going to do questions and stuff. There's so much I could talk about this, but I hope you understood the foundational things. Is because we hid or were too busy to speak truth and stand for the truth the last 50 years, things have dramatically changed. Our country, the people that are in charge of almost everything do not have the same agenda that God has, and don't value things he values, and don't want things done his way. They want it done their way, and it's all about totalitarian control. That's the future of where we're headed, is complete and total control with the CBDCs, the digital currencies and IDs and stuff that they're working on it desperately. 2030 is a key year to them. You just need to know that. The goals they have for 2030 are significant, which means they have a lot of ground to capture between now and then. And I know these people from having read and studied the last 150 years of their plans and schemes. There's nothing off limits. We think, well, no, they wouldn't. Oh, yes, they would. There's nothing off limits. They're Satan's disciples. If they have to kill women, children, old people, that doesn't mean anything. Humans, now with the environmental movement, are the enemy of the planet in their new worldview. And so that's where we stand. So I want to encourage you in a few things here. The nice thing is we do have the truth, and we are on God's side, which is very comforting, because he can at any time he wants crush them under his fist. Okay, but again, as we see them prosper, that should always drive us as Christians to our knees, going, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not having been one of your disciples while I'm here on this earth. I've been caught up in all the foolishness of the world. Remember, he has heaven planned for us if you're born again. That's forever. The lost man, yeah, his whole life is just having more fun today, and that makes sense. If this is all you have, just do whatever you can do, and hopefully something will be fulfilling, and they'll find out, no, it's not. But we have that forever. But I've found the longer I live, doing things God's way is not a sacrifice. It gives you the happiest life on this earth too. So it's like, oh, so you didn't even make us really sacrifice. It looks like a sacrifice because we can't participate in all the foolishness of the world, but the longer you live, you realize it is foolishness. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. And you live long enough, you see, wow, that guy looked like he was having fun, but now he's in rehab because he's addicted to those substances that he thought were so fun to be involved with or whatever. So we need to live not by lies. It's a famous essay by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, but we need to just commit to not ever stand silent in the presence of a lie, ever again. When someone speaks a lie, we can always do it kindly. We have to say, I'm sorry, that's actually wrong. Let me show you this medical study on masks. It does nothing. You've been lied to, and I just wanted to let you know that, or whatever it might be. When we have the truth, we know it, so we can present it. Maybe they'll reject it. That's not our business. But we've planted the seed of truth, and they will be accountable that someone said, you're lying. But we've been silent far too long. We need to pray, prepare, separate out as far as our life. We need to be involved with people, but we need to separate ourselves. God says to be separate, and then we need to share the gospel. But we need to be living in such a way when we share the gospel, it all makes sense. If you're living a life that's different, you have higher standards, you're not watching the same garbage everybody else is, you're not doing all the things, then when you say, hey, I follow Jesus, and let me tell you about him, what he did for you on the cross, it's like, okay, it makes sense. Like, yeah, you are different. So he must be real. And so we need to take advantage of that. We need to just be more prepared in what we do. We need to defend the defenseless. We need to stand for truth. We need to, I think, just being wise, just prepare more where you are to be self-sufficient as best you can be, or just be prepared. I just see so many storm clouds on the horizon. I don't know what it might be, but I know it could be anything. It could be a natural thing. It could be a black swan type thing. It could be something they create. But I know they have a lot of yardage to cover in a short amount of time. And I know that their commander-in-chief loves destruction and death. And maybe God allowing that to happen will be an answer to our prayers. Maybe he'll go, no, I'm allowing these things because then people will turn back to me. And if that's the case, thank you, dear Lord. I always tell them, please, if you want us to suffer, that's wonderful. Help us to grow through the suffering. But please spare our lives so we can be here to speak the truth in the midst of the suffering. If there's going to be some big thing, please preserve us and refine us so we will be here to say, no, this all happened because we threw God out of the schools. And we said the 10 Commandments, we can't have those up in the schools because the kids might read them. And if they read them, they might obey them. Do you know that's word for word what the Supreme Court, why they said they cannot be in the schools? They said if they're on the wall, they might read them. And if they might read them, they might obey them. Therefore, they have to be out of the schools in 1980. It's word for word what they said. That was their logic in removing the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. So that's where we are. But I know God has picked each of us for such a time as this. That's the good news too. If you're like, I don't know what to do, ask. Ask him. He's put us all here for a purpose. Tomorrow morning, hopefully a lot of you will be here. I'm going to give my testimony of when I was 32 when I finally said, God, I'm tired of doing my thing. What did you put me on this earth to do? And he just changed so many. It's just shocking to me. But I realized I think he's been waiting for a lot of us to ask that, not just always boss him around. God, would you bless my restaurant? God, would you bless my family? God, would you help me have a good day today? God, would you? That's what at 32, I realized I'm always telling him what to do. He's supposed to be telling me what to do. And I repented. I said, I am sorry for wasting 32 years. What do you want me to do? And everything in my life changed when I meant that, and I did mean it. So, but that's for you too. There's no accidents. And all the things the world says are little nothings, that's a lie. They're usually the most valuable, meaningful, productive things that there is. So we could do some questions now if you want, and then I'll tell you a little bit about some of our stuff once we're done with the questions. Okay. Okay. Okay.
What do you think the goal is of the war in Ukraine and what they're trying to do with Russia? What do you think the end is there?
Well, I think they, like I said, they love war. Just like we know, we've sent, 120 billion over there with no accounting. Our congressman, hey, can we have an accounting? They're going to use it for freedom. Half of that is being laundered into the back pockets of supporters and nonprofits and everything else. So that's always a good reason. It's also great to sidetrack. When you get a war going on, people are dying, that makes people more concerned about that, and they're not watching other things and noticing all. And it gave them a scapegoat. Why are gas prices high? Oh, because of the Ukraine war. It's not because you cut off all of our gas production in America, which of course it was. So that's some of the reasons, but it's strategic too. I think the Ukraine has been just a laundering facility for the elites in our country for a long, long time. They're just laundering money through there, and so I think they're not. There's nothing that's off the table. I want to also remind everyone. You always have to remember this: is that war would never have started. Okay, and never if Biden would have said one sentence. The Ukraine will never be part of NATO. So just know that. so they can twist it to why aren't you for freedom, whatever. We love the Ukrainian people, and I love the Russian people too. I've got to know so many of them from making my films that live in America, and they grew up in the Soviet Union, and they come tell me their stories. War is just death and destruction, and almost never has it been productive like they tell, oh, we're fighting for freedom. It's a lie most of the time. But they know we love that idea of having a noble life, dying for freedom or whatever, the Alamo, the guys standing up there or whatever. We love that. And they know that. But they're provoking Putin. I think they're doing it purposefully to destroy the dollar. You have to understand this thing is not America versus, it's the elites. Pretty much, in my mind, the same people kind of giving advice to Biden are giving advice to Putin and giving advice to Xi and giving advice, the bank or the people that they control the purse strings of the world, which makes sense. They can collapse a currency overnight if they wanted to. And those people, even those dictators know that. The Soviet Union was propped up by all the Rockefeller family. They were collapsing 2 years into the experiment. And the Rockefellers funneled them hundreds of millions of dollars. So they want this enemy there. So it's so different than what you've been taught. And I know if you haven't heard this, don't be overwhelmed. It's okay. God's sitting on his throne. He's in total control. And I don't want to pour out too much. I studied it for decades. So there's so many facets of this. But almost everything you've ever been taught in your entire life about American history since in the last 100 is a total lie. Isn't that sad? Because here's what happens. After 50 years, all the top secret classified documents are declassified. So researchers go in, like in the 90s when they declassified all the stuff for World War II, where then you can look at all the congressional top secret meetings and the White House memos, and you can really see, okay, what was going on with World War II? Well, one thing, and for instance, which just shows this, is in 1943, 2 years before the war was over, the top Nazi officers came to our military and said, we will give you Hitler if you just allow us to defend our country from the Soviet Union trying to take over Germany. And our leader said, no, you will unconditionally surrender. We will decide what happens to Germany, and that's it. And they're like, well, we can't do that. This is our country. We've been here for 1,000 years. And no. So most of the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. But our military said, no. The White House, who was the top advisor in the White House to FDR? Alger Hiss, who we know today was a Soviet spy. He was Stalin's right-hand man. He was the only advisor that FDR brought to him to the Yalta talks, which decided what happened to Europe after the war. I mean, it's on and on. I'm just telling you a couple of things exact, so you realize, okay, there's a lot I don't know, and there is. But every 50 years they unfold, they open up all the books because everybody's dead and gone. But some of these top researchers get in there, what was really going on, and we see, oh, it's nothing of what I was told. It's none of that. It's the wicked people. America is wonderful. What it was founded on was wonderful. But unfortunately, anything that has power, wicked are attracted to and immediately try to rise up and control. And we know today, too, that during FDR's administration, from a Yale researcher who researched it after the declassified documents, FDR had in his cabinet and administration over 200 Soviet spies. 200 of his top advisors were Soviet spies now, we know, not just leftists or anti-American. That's M. Stanton Evans. He's in my first movie. He's a brilliant researcher from Yale University. That was his last book before he died, Stalin's Secret Agents, which was the entire cabinet of FDR. So that's why everything was just like, why are they doing what they're doing? So I'm sorry I got off on that, but it's important. There's so much here that you have to go. But so the Ukraine war is another thing. Do they need Putin to nuke American city? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not saying that, but nothing is off the table. I know that. They want to have this world government. They want America to be eliminated, to be able to have it. And they know that 100 years ago, they were writing papers on, if we want world government, America has got to go. You can't have this one city, this one country like a city on a hill, and everyone else willfully accepting world government. They're like, no, we want to be like America, and so they knew they had, that's why everything's always been against us. As Trump found out, all the trade deals just totally undermining us, totally. He's like, what? These aren't fair deals. No, they weren't supposed to be. They're supposed to impoverish, keep taking us down one notch at a time. And once you're down in that dependency stage, you really don't care who's in power. What am I eating today? And that they want to get you to that survival mode where you just, like in the Soviet Union, people just gave up. I'll just go wait in line for 7 hours to get my loaf of bread for the day. And that's all I can do. I'm not going to say a word because I'll be tortured like that one guy was. I'm just going to be quiet and do what I'm told. That's the end game, what they would like. Oh,
Yes, I just kind of started to mention something about. Do you think President Trump has a little bit more understanding about some of these things? It kind of started to sound like he alluded to some of that maybe.
well, I
Certainly
think
more than Biden and much more.
no, Biden's part of this thing, and he has been his entire life. Just in this,
The second part of that.
yeah. Trump, I think, was very naive when he got in there. The things I like about him, he's got all his stuff, but I think he really loves America and he really loves the American people. That to me was he can have a million faults if he actually loves the people he's representing. He might do stupid things, he might not do the best thing every time because he has bad advisors, but I know in my mind, he is not ever intentionally trying to hurt our country or hurt us as people. But I think he had a real education, even having a lot of experience in just the business world. You step in the political world, you're out of your class because this is so dark and deceitful and wicked, and so the blackmail going on and everything behind the scenes. That if he got in there again, I think he would be wiser, hopefully, and realize, oh my! I mean, he like Bill Barr and some of these people he's picking. They're the swamp, but he didn't know that. He thought, oh, he's talking about God. He must be a decent guy. We as Christians all the time, and they know it. They fall for, well, I heard him talk about Jesus, whoever it might be. Like, then he's okay. They know that. When I was a representative in Idaho, and Idaho is just like so far, it was back then especially so conservative. I realized as I got in there, I was appointed by the governor, so all of a sudden I'm thrown in there. And I'm sitting with guys that I had looked up to, voted for, been, part of their campaigns and stuff. And all of a sudden, like, it's all talk. They have no interest in doing. We had an 85% majority. I mean, that's a dream that will never happen in any state in America ever again. 85%. So it's a super, super majority of the House, of the Senate, and the governor. And you couldn't pass a Republican piece of legislation through there to save your life. And I was like, that's where the agenda films came from. I'm in there going, what is going on? So something is bigger, more powerful, something is happening here because this is crazy. When 85% of the people in our state, if we had done something conservative, would have stood up and cheered. And you're not doing any of that? But they always had a good reason why. That's when I saw, okay, they take polls because they know what you believe if you live in their district. So when they come give a speech, they're going to cover all those key things. But they know you're not going to watch them when it actually comes to all the thousands of votes and stuff. And so just the words will pacify you to vote for them, but then they're doing what's best for them. They're not doing what's best for you. Yeah, so it's just, that's what it is. And at the federal level, it's 10 times. I have several good friends with United States senators and congressmen, and it's so just discouraging at that level. That's why I always encourage you all to work local. Make this town the best town it can be. This county the best county it can be. The church, right where you are. Go out from there. Of course, you vote in the federal thing stuff, but we need to start grabbing islands of freedom and working right where we are to love our neighbor by working to have a healthy community where the churches are strong and healthy, that there's help for those in need, but that's not coming from government. It's real help from real people that can have a relationship and things like that, and sharing the gospel and working right, getting a good sheriff, all those type of things, because that is probably the best solution to this problem. And eventually, if we can get some states to say, no, thank you, as they keep just pushing and pushing at the federal level, I just don't think we're ever going to have a 50 United States ever again. because the other people's they're not disappearing or whatever. So there's like to think, I think at some point if there could be a break of southern states or whatever, or just independent states that, like Florida did during the COVID, you can have your mandates. We're not doing it. Well, we just do more of that at the state level. The governor's just, no, thank you. This is mandated. It's not to us. Thank you. And just do that more and more so it sets precedent. Then they can have this madhouse if they want. We're going to have a peaceful, productive, blessed area, and you can do whatever you want. We're not interested. That's right. Right where God has put you.
My other thing was, you know so much, and I'm around a lot of smart people sometimes, but I'm still grasping. Was there something that started you on all of this particular book that just helped you understand the thing? What is there something you would suggest to be able to verbalize this kind of thing to others?
Yeah.
That's not too
yes.
Technical.
Yeah. One of the books we have is I made my movie back, the first one in 2010. And my dad, who's studied this his whole life and taught me everything I know, he saw that movie but hadn't been as much involved because he was older. He's 90 now. And he saw it and he said, one of the things my movie mentions is a book from 1958 called The Naked Communist. And in that book, there was a list of 45 current communist goals from the 50s. And my dad said, I read that book back then, and he had stood up against it. But then he wrote a book, and I think it's better than The Naked Communist because it brings it up to today, called The Naked Truth. Someone's holding it up right there for you. It's at our booth. But my father, who had lived through all of this change, he was a college professor, he wrote this book a few years ago. And he goes through each of the communist goals, all 45 of them, just a page at a time. It tells how they accomplished that. And so it really helps you. It gives you an incredible education of the last 50, 60, 70 years. And it's a short little book, and each chapter is just a goal or two. So it's real easy reading, but it's how you read that. And he's putting in personal stories from his own life because he was born in 1934, and he's lived through all this. He's lived through all this change. But that's a really good one to get started. If you want to understand communism, the book we have, it's called You Can Still Trust the Communist. I reprinted it. It's from 1960. Dr. Fred Schwartz, how many of you have heard of that name? Every single one of you should have heard of that name. America would not be free if it wasn't for Dr. Fred Schwartz. It had already fallen long ago. Incredible man. I got to have dinner with him a few times before he died. He came to America in the 1950s. He's a medical doctor from Australia. And he noticed in the 1950s, you're falling to communism right now in America. He never practiced medicine again, never went back to Australia. He moved to America, started the Christian anti-communist crusade, and started speaking all over the country. He would go speak in coliseums where 50,000 people would come out to hear him give a 3-hour lecture on communism in the 50s and the 60s. Ronald Reagan would be the MC to introduce him before he got up there to talk. He taught Ronald Reagan everything he knows about Marxism. But he wrote this book then in 1960 called You Can Trust the Communist. And you think the title of what? But he explains very clearly in the book, you can trust it because when they say something, they're going to do it. They mean what they say. We don't, they do. So when they give you a list, they're going to check every single one of them off, whether you think they're capable of it or not. And so that one, he gets into the Marxist mind. And then Dr. David Noble, any of you ever heard of him? Summit Ministries. He wrote a book called Understanding the Times. That's incredible. It goes through the biblical worldview compared to the Marxist-Leninist worldview, the Islamic worldview, all the pagan world, secular humanist worldview, everything. Well, I had the blessing. God has prepared me in so many ways. I spent every summer out there with him and my family at Summit Ministries from 1971 to 1998 for 27 summers. And he would just teach every 2 weeks. A whole new group of young people would come in, a couple hundred from all over the country, and he taught them a Christian worldview. But he would talk about communism and Marxism and Islam and everything else, where they knew what was going on when they left there. And he did that for 50 years. He's still living too, but he's older now. I just talked to him. But he took that book of Dr. Schwartz because he's the one that Dr. Schwartz picked him to take over his the Christian Anti-Communist Crusade, and he updated the book copy we have. So it's the original book, but then in 2020, Dr. Noble goes through everything they've done since 1960 to 2020. So it's real. It's just like if you read that book, you know more than the top 10% of a college professor would know as much as that if he's talking on this. And Dr. Fred Schwartz. That you can still trust the communist. Yep. So that anyway, those are ones that they're excellent if you want to know more about this. There was a lady right up front here.
Yes, my question is, can you tell us what the intent of never closing our borders is, and what do you think the end effect is going to be?
Yes. Is that strategic? Yes, it is. They, again, the UN and different groups in the 70s were talking about this. Open, but where there's no borders in any country, but especially for America. What it does, I mean, it does a million things. It dilutes the population. It destroys the patriotism. It burdens economically the society. You know, we're going to have had 10 plus million come in just during Joe Biden's first term. Well, most of them don't speak the language. So you can't provide for yourself. You have to be on the dole. I mean, there's no really option here, or you can do criminal activity. You don't have to speak their language to do that. But there's no, even the well-intentioned one. You come in, you're thrown in here. All of a sudden, there's kids are in the schools. If they have, or they get their debit cards. They're getting $2,200 a month or whatever it is, each one of them. They get a free phone. Our government's paying for all that. They get more. Their monthly checks are more than the average Social Security check. And our Social Security is collapsing. And I mean, you just see it and you're like, it's purposeful. It's collapsing. Cloward and Piven, a strategy I talked about in my first movie. It was a strategy. This is what you do. You get as many people mooching off the system as possible. They would, the liberals, Marxists back in the 60s would just go through all the poor neighborhoods, signing everyone up for every entitlement they could get to collapse the system. And they pulled it off in New York City. They actually bankrupted New York City. That was where their first test ground was in the 60s. Let's see if we can do this. And it collapsed. They go, okay, we're doing this nationwide. Just going to keep burdening down our productivity. Those that are working hard, you're going to have to keep taxing them more and more and more. Instead of teaching those that are poor, hey, here's how you do it. So no, just give them a check, which creates laziness, and it creates where you just finally, you're dependent on the system. And then those entitlements, you feel, I'm entitled to that. So it makes the worst of all, someone that's getting something and they're not even grateful for it. You know, if you had someone that's true, thank you so much for this, then you go, okay, at least I have a grateful person, which is a blessing to society. But when I have someone, is that all my check is this month? That's ridiculous. Then you're destroying a grateful heart, and it's a horrible thing. But yes, it's so key, it's so strategy. And we know that at least 40,000 Chinese military age men have come in so far. 40,000 that we know of. That's not all the gotaways, which are millions, which we don't know. So are they doing something with that? I don't know for sure, but I'm like, if you had 40,000 military people they could take America down like that. They say it would actually take about 200 people could take America down immediately if they had a strategy working together, because they could take out the entire power grid in America in one day. Just 200 people working simultaneously to take out the transformers and things. And then you go into a black hole, because without power, even our Congress said 90 days you'd have 150 plus million deaths from starvation and everything else. So, but you're allowing that. So it's allowing this threat to be there. So again, they can have a crisis and say, we didn't do that. They love blaming other people, even though, they love everything, any catastrophe.
Fatalism that you're right now talking about, part of what's driving the biblical raised child to go away from his biblical roots when he's getting older. That's one part of it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, well, so as this 92% are leaving their biblical roots when they get to college, what do you think would be the most effective strategy for parents, for fathers, to bring them back? And when the parents are telling the truth to these children, and they then completely ignore the parents and keep them from seeing their grandchildren, and these various really difficult situations. What can parents do about all of this?
Yeah, well, I think one of the key things is to really live out the Christian faith yourself. I think all of us were prone to bring the kids to church and thinking that's going to make them Christians or whatever, and it's not. I mean, you should, reading the Bible daily in your home together and singing hymns and talking about these things and studying. And so they do understand the times, but then knowing God put you here for right now. So it's not, you're going to be the heroes of the next generation. So it's like, this is a great privilege to be born in such a time like this, when there's a crisis of truth. There's a crisis going on all around us. That's a great time. That's the kind that, who was it? One of the founders' wives said, right in the middle of the revolution and stuff, she said, this is a time that you just pray to be born in. There's so much going on. Instead of the 50s Americans sitting there staring at the cartoons all day, and your life is just meaningless. So, but I think the main reason we've lost the kids is we didn't train them up in the way they should go. They didn't know Genesis to Revelations. I mean, where they've studied in detail. They didn't have parents that maybe were consistent in what they said they believed. Well, you need to not watch bad things, but then maybe they were watching bad things. Or don't listen to that kind of music, but then the parents listen to that kind of music. Or where there's that inconsistency because everyone's repulsed from that. The hypocrisy when you tell them, be clean and pure, and then they, catch dad looking at something or whatever. It's like, and so I think that's a huge part of it. I think just my generation played church. I just think all the young men I grew up with, almost all of them, we were in the same church together, but their life wasn't different than anybody else. You watch whatever movie, well, that's the end movie, I'm watching it. Not realizing, well, what if they're blaspheming God? What if there's nudity? What if there's... So I think it's to really, to be all in, to really go, and then praying for your kids, because, my actions by themselves are not going to cut it. God needs to be merciful, but trying to model what it really means to be a Christian, where they really see you sharing the gospel with people. You go sit down on the sidewalk at the gas station, and they really say, "Yeah, Dad, we're waiting for Dad. He's over there on the sidewalk sharing the gospel with somebody. It'll be a minute." And those type of things where you're trying to, as often as possible, every day, hopefully, practice the way God would really want us to live our life. And in doing that, I think then they see it really is a meaningful life. If you're not just playing church, if you're the joy of sharing the gospel with someone when God allows them to get it, is such, there's nothing in the world that compares to that. There's nothing in the world that compares to just talking about Jesus with someone that's listening and it's interested in what you're saying. But we're, again, trying to give them as many of those experiences as possible. Help them understand the times. Hey, this is a war, kids. And everything out here is a deception in this world. The chocolate bar sitting there has poison in it. Whatever, when it might be a temptation of Satan. Once you realize God is God, whether you like it or not, and He's given you these list of things. Be careful of that wayward woman. Be careful of this. And you don't listen, that's a fool. When He told you no, that was toxic. But every sin is when you are calling God a liar. Whenever you sin, you are calling Him a liar. All of us are, me included. Because you're saying, I don't believe you. Telling the lies of conscience. I don't believe you. So I just told a lie. And again, when we do that, we just need to instant, God, I'm sorry. That is ridiculous. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me for that. Help me not to do that ever again. And we're constantly self-correcting, but we're looking for those around us that are lost and they're heading toward hell. To really go, put your arm around them. Do you mind if I share something with you? One of the best ways, if you're, a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that, but 20 years ago, I went through Ray Comfort. Have you ever heard of Ray Comfort? Living Waters. He goes out on the street in Southern California, which would be a tough place to do it, but just shares the gospel with people. I went through his course 20 years ago. That has been the single greatest blessing in my entire Christian life. Just where you do have an answer and you can say it in a nice way, and you're letting them do most of the talking because you're just asking them questions. and you're going to see the lights go on when they realize, oh, I guess I'm guilty. And it's just such a great way. It's just how God, or how Jesus presented the gospel. He let them see their sin first and then tell them the good news. But it is so effective. I have had so many wonderful experiences with that. So I encourage you in that, because that is the solution ultimately. I go around and talk on what's going on because sometimes that's needed to sober people up to, this is a war going on. And in a war, you need to be sharing the gospel and things because that's the solution. Once you are no longer blind and you eyes see, then all of a sudden they go, oh, they see the lies then. It's when you're just willfully ignorant or you're lost, where you're spiritually blind, so you don't see the things the way we see the things. And so that's the single greatest thing you could do to make a difference is be living the gospel. I always say, make sure you're speaking the truth, living the truth, and then sharing the truth. And God can take that in any of us and do great things. I've seen so much of that in my life. I'm like, God, why would you do that? He goes, because I want to. The way he's designed the universe is he is accomplishing his purposes through us. So if we're not doing anything, that it's not accomplishing his purposes. And most of what has happened, all these things have been set up by Satan and the church losing its effectiveness by cowering inside the four walls of the church, starting back in the 1930s when the Humanist Manifesto came out. It said the church belongs inside the church walls. And then, okay, we'll do that. As that started to happen, as the church went in and the light went in, the culture has gotten so dark. That's the darkness we see. Said the mask has come off. They will mutilate a little child. There's no more games. And that should sober us to go, I better step up and engage in this battle because there's casualties and it's of a permanent nature. And God could maybe use me to be the one that gets to blessing. But even if you just share the gospel with someone, those seeds are there. And God, I know when we get to heaven, we'll see what he did with our little loaves and fishes that we thought, oh, I just gave the guy a tract. Yeah, but he got saved. And so did his kids. And so did his wife. And whatever. We'll see his miraculous hand on things. Yes. Yeah. She said, what strategy will they use to get the gun and what shall our response be? Our response should be whatever you feel God would want you to do. That's really, it's like voting or something. You can't ever tell, this is who you should vote. No, I always tell you vote for who you think God wants you to vote for, period. And you're not worrying about pleasing man or pleasing others or, well, it's our only thing. No, do I have permission to vote for that person? Yes or no? No? Okay, who do you want me to vote for? So the third party or whatever. So we always want to please God because he's the one that can, like this, change this stuff around if he chooses to. So you want to please God. But they do want the guns, obviously. I mean, that's the one thing that has kept this from going as fast as they would like it. And my personal belief is we have a God-given duty, especially as a man, to protect my wife and children. And that's my duty. It's something I can't shirk. So I can't allow them to do that because then I'm not able to do that anymore. So I'm like, you cannot do that because that God has given me that job as a man, as a father, and as a husband to protect those he's entrusted to me. But I know they would love to create a civil war. They even have a movie coming out next month called that. They always plant the seeds. They would love that because that's the only thing I feel that they could use. If you had it maybe in a couple big cities where people were killing each other, I could picture that being the excuse where they would take the military and go door to door, say, hey, we got to stop the killing. 20,000 people have already died in Minneapolis or whatever. And that would, even a lot of people go, oh, that is bad. We need to do something. So I don't know that. I'm just saying I see them putting seeds of civil war out there in things they're pushing. I'm like, okay, they usually foretell very clearly where they're going. Just like a year ago, Bill Gates had a whole conference. I've listened to it, watched it because I wanted to understand, called Catastrophic Contagion 2025. It was a whole conference with doctors from all over the world, and I listened to them, and they said in 2025, we're going to have a pandemic that makes COVID look like a joke, and it's primarily going to just kill children. Their whole conference was on that. I'm like, well, how do you know that? But it made me go, okay, is that the plan? I don't know, but I've learned to pay attention because for some sick reason, they love telling you what's going to happen. And they think then when it happens, they're going to be able to say, see, we told you so you wouldn't listen to it. And instead of us going, so you did this, obviously, because you can't predict something like this. But they think it's the other way around, where it makes them look brilliant or whatever. So.
They had the same daggum thing in 2019. Remember,
Yes.
Biden personally said
Yeah.
that Trump's going to deal with the pandemic.
Yeah, Fauci in January
right.
of 2017
Right.
told Trump, you will have a
They've also had the
worldwide.
other ones that are sitting there talking about trying to control the population growth.
Yeah.
And then they all of a sudden come out with the same guy that was sitting there, a little indie dude,
Yeah,
was sitting there talking about we got to get rid of a bunch of people. How do we do that? And within a week, he's preaching, take the jab.
no, and that's why we need to share the gospel, because they love death. The Bible says that all those who hate me love death when it's talking about wisdom. And so, death is that's Satan's ultimate thing, to destroy something made in the image of God. So that's the game. They cannot do that without God allowing that. He can only go so far. But when God allows some of the things, again, it could be to answer our prayers. He goes, okay, you want America to turn back to me? All right, we'll give you the circumstances for that. And if he did that and we did turn back to him, praise the Lord, no matter how much suffering, how much death, whatever. But we want to be used in the midst of that. That's what I'm saying. Where you understand the times, so you realize, okay, it is sober times. I need to be alert and doing what God put me here to do, but also just, again, not getting caught. The world, the billboards, the advertising, we're so prone to be caught up in just living like a lost man, because it's a really nice life in America. And you can just live your whole life having fun and games. I mean, it's very easy. But as Christians, we go, you can't do that. When we get to heaven and see what God has prepared for us, we will look at the greatest thing this earth had to offer and go, that's like playing in the sewer compared to heaven and eternity. So I want to encourage you to that. Just don't let that mind, don't watch too much TV and stuff that makes you, I need that new car and I'll be happier. I need that, whatever. It's all lies. It's all fifth generation warfare from Satan to manipulate you to do what he wants you to do instead of what you should do. And that's all. Once you're saved, you know, it's okay, I can't get them, but I can get their time, which is the most precious thing that they have. And if I can get that time, that means God gave us just enough time on this earth to do whatever he's put us here to do. And if we have wasted it on other things, that means we're not going to have enough time to do what he put us on this earth to do. And that's Satan's end game for the Christian. Keep them sidetracked, keep them busy, and we will keep progressing forward. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And if anyone has a question, I will be up here and happy to answer them or whatever, just so if you need to go. I want to tell you real quickly. Oh, there you are, sweet. Thank you. Okay, just some of the things we have. This is kind of what helps us as we go and travel. The resources we've got, books and video, the 2 documentaries we made. This is a poster of the charts from the movies. A lot of people love those, so we better make those. But there's also some beautiful music. God bless my wife with a beautiful voice and stuff, and then she's training the kids to harmonize and sing and play the piano and different things. So there's several different CDs out there, but they're just beautiful, peaceful hymns that you need. You need to remember who God is, especially if you're getting heavy with the weight of what's going on, to stop and turn on some beautiful hymns to remember who God is refreshes the soul. So that's good. But we have this bag. It's $100. It has everything that we have in it. Some people can get that. Everything is individually out there too. It's half price of what it is on the webpage. We also have something. This has really been a good thing. We get emails every day about people enjoying this, but something called Agenda Weekly. And as we've been traveling on the road, my family and I, and it used to be all 9 kids with us. And when we first started traveling, we had a 1, 2, and 3-year-old, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, and 17, whatever. And so it was a full boat, but it was a blessing. But as we travel, we would go to places with a lot of people that cared about our country, that loved the Lord, but they didn't have a clue what was going on. And I realized, even though they were sitting there staring at the TV 20 hours a week or whatever, and there's so many confusing messages, they still were kind of, I'm not sure what's going on. So about 4 years ago, my son-in-law and I, we started Agenda Weekly. What it is, we go through all week. We subscribe to tons of newsletters and all different things, maybe 100 different sources. We go through those to figure out, okay, here, and then we have a news brief. Here's the main things that happened this week, just in bullet point form with just a sentence or two. Here's the main good things that happened this week that you probably didn't hear about. And then here's prayer and action items, things to be praying about, things to be doing. And then I make a video every week, 30, 45 minutes long, talking about a different issue. Like this 5th generation warfare was one of the issues 2 years ago or something. Just understanding this, what's going on. And so we send it out every Friday night. And so our point in doing it was hoping that you would understand the times better, but it would save you time. So you have time to go take the neighbor to lunch. You have time to go out with the grandkids and try to influence them and build a relationship. You have time for those things because you just turn the dumb TV off. That's just confusion anyway. It's like this group channel said this and this channel said that. I don't know what's going on. So we have done our best to do that, to be a blessing so you can be more productive with the time that you do have. Because I know God wants us to do that. But if you sign up for that, it's $5 a month. That's what funds our whole thing when we're home and doing what we do. And it's a full-time thing, my son-in-law and I. But if you sign up when we're there in person, we give you a free copy of both films to go along with that because, anyway, to encourage you to do that, but it's a blessing to us. And I think it'll be a blessing to you. We get so many emails that are so encouraging from so many people every week. I'm like, oh, good. I think it's having the effect that we wanted it to have, where it's a blessing to them and encouragement. And then they're acting. Hey, are you praying about these things? Are you doing these things? Are you, don't just sit there and mope, whatever. We need to be doing something. So anyway, that's stuff that's available there if you're interested. But tomorrow morning, if you can be here, I'm going to give my testimony, which is not as much about this stuff as just how God pulled me into this in just some different neat things of his faithfulness to me and my family. And hopefully as an encouragement to you. God is alive and well. And he can part the Red Sea anytime he wants to. And I look over the last X number of years in our country, I go, I think he hasn't been parting the Red Sea because no one's been holding up the staff and done the things he said, do this. And so we're trying to do that the best we can, imperfectly. But I'm trying to encourage the troops to just, however much time you have left on this earth, be all in. I'm all in, God. What do you want me to do? 100% I'm in. And I know he will say, okay, I've been waiting to hear that. And I know he will have something meaningful and that will have a huge impact. So give me a closing prayer. Okay. Dear God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for your blessings, your kindness, beautiful weather outside. Thank you for traveling mercies. Thank you for these people that are here. Dear God, I pray that each one of them will have taken something that will encourage, uplift, educate, motivate them to be faithful to do the things you've asked them to do. Please bless our little efforts. Please take our loaves and fishes and feed the 5,000. Please do the things we can't do and help us to be faithful and help us to not be sidetracked and help us to have the wisdom to know the difference and to have discern the times and be able to see the lies for lies and the truth for truth. And we love you very much. In Jesus' name, amen.